Thank you so much for having me. I'm just going to set my timer here because this is a topic that I could talk about for hours, and I certainly want to recognize that I have 50 minutes to share my message with you today. Okay. So, marketable skills. I was so excited when the coordinating board unveiled this particular goal. This is work that I have believed in, I have championed since the very beginning. Even as a student, when I had this liberal arts degree that no one understood, and the only employers who came to campus to hire were looking for business majors. And the schedules, and I'm dating myself, this was back in the day where you would line up and sign up for an interview. You didn't do this online. It explicitly stated, only business students. Right, so this is something that I really have had a passion around just from my own personal experience. And Ginger and I, and thank you, Ginger, for the invitation to speak today, have had many conversations over the most recent years about the work that's happening in this space. The marketable skills goal really does champion the interpersonal, the cognitive, and applied skills that are truly valued by employers. In fact, many employers today tell us we don't care about the major. We are more concerned about those comprehensive skills that the students bring to the table. I applaud the coordinating board. They have partnered with, I know, the Texas Workforce Commission and other foundations to produce phenomenal resources, one of them the College Readiness Handbook, and today I was just looking at the internship guide for employers. Those are the kinds of tools that will help all of us be successful on our campuses and beyond. And ensuring that our students are able to, most importantly, articulate their marketable skills. So I'm going to frame this in a piece of research that I'm going to share that you may or may not like to hear. But the Lumina Foundation, they engaged in a study of public perception of whether or not our students are prepared for the workforce. When surveyed, chief officers at institutions, academic officers, indicated at a 99% rate that students were prepared. They know they're prepared, they're getting jobs, etc. When the business community, organizations were surveyed, 11% indicated that students are indeed prepared. This was a national study. I think in Texas, of course, it doesn't apply to us. But I want you to reflect on that research as we talk and engage today, this morning, and throughout the day on this important topic. Because if that's the perception, perhaps our students have an unfair position in the process. If the perception is they are not prepared, then what can we do to change that landscape, to help them articulate what we all know they can do? So the Higher Ed Coordinating Board leaned on the NACE Career Readiness Competencies. I can tell you a little bit about this, just some background, because NACE did not come up with these competencies out of the blue sky. In 2014, a task force was assembled to conduct extensive research with thousands of employers representing a variety of industries. And the question was, what is it that you look for in your talent, whether it's an intern or a full-time entry-level position? What's important to you? These are not in any particular order, although I will tell you that just happens that the first one tends to be the lead in what employers are looking for. Communication is also a close second. For the last 2 decades, communication was number 1, and it has flipped. Critical thinking, problem solving, which if you really think about it, communication is inherent in, right? So I want to just spend a few moments sharing a little bit about what this means, because I think we make assumptions. And when we work with students on our campus, when we work with faculty and administrators, and we say, here is what we need to do to best prepare our students, we can tell a student all day long, you need to be able to think critically. And the student will say, yes. And then faculty will give them assignments where they do think critically. But when the student moves on and sits in front of employer, they cannot articulate how they have thought critically. That's the key right there. So when you look at critical thinking and problem solving, here's the gist of it. Reasoning and analysis, decision making, overcoming problems. So we need to teach our students to say, to answer that question. Tell me about a big challenge you encountered, and how did you manage it, and what did you learn? Sometimes tying that example to something in the classroom, a class project they worked on, is the most effective way to do that, because it really does show that they reasoned and they analyzed a situation. Often, I think when we ask students to share a problem, they share a personal problem, which isn't always bad. It works too. But I think that, our employer community is really looking for that solid, give me some of the research you've engaged in, the knowledge that you have, and how you applied it directly. Oral and written communication skill, critical. And I would add to that nonverbal communication skill, because so many of our students, including ourselves, walk around like this. And we are no longer always accustomed to that connection, that eye to eye, that interpersonal that needs to happen. So helping our students to articulate their ability to communicate effectively really rests on all of our plates. Not one entity at an institution can do that alone. It takes practice. Teamwork and collaboration. Really here we're looking at not can you lead a team of people who are just like you. Can you lead a team that represents diversity, diverse thought, diverse representation? Those are the kinds of things we need to engage our students in thinking. They can do that in the classroom through class projects. They can do that certainly outside of the classroom through co-curricular experiences that they have. Really looking at the fact that we are in a very, very unique position today in our workforce. Our workforce, for the first time ever, is comprised of 5 generations. 5 generations. So we have our traditionalists, our baby boomers, our Gen Xers, Gen Y or millennials, and now most recently, Gen Z. If you're wondering what's happening, if we're going to add another letter to the alphabet beyond that, it's going to be, the next one will be Alpha. I think we're going to the Greek system after this. That's the latest I've heard anyway. But that is tremendous. And when we talk to employers through NACE, when we conduct research, when I talk to employers and engage with them, that has to be the biggest disconnect. Is that we all of us included, get stuck in how we like to consume information, how we want to communicate and work with others who are somewhat like us. So this really does challenge our students to demonstrate they understand the incredibly vast landscape of our workforce today. When we look at the next one, which is digital technology, I always found this quite interesting because I thought, why do we even have to say that? Because our students are so knowledgeable. If I cannot figure something out, I ask one of my student employees in the office. I do not sit there for 2 hours trying to figure something out on Excel or whatever it is, trying to produce a document. They know. But guess what? They don't know what they know. So when NACE conducted a survey to ask employers, what is your perception of students' readiness in the digital technology space? Sky high. When students were surveyed, what is your own perception of your readiness in the digital technology space? At least 20 points lower, percentage points. They don't know what they know. And it's our job to help them understand what are the emerging technologies, not only in the sciences, what are the emerging technologies in the arts, in business. We really have to look at the entire landscape on our academic campuses. Leadership. Again, looking at leveraging diverse talents of others towards a common goal. So when students are asked, tell me about your leadership capabilities or experiences, they often say, well, I'm president of my sorority. What does that mean? Right? Or I was the lead in a project that we did in class. What does that mean? Tell me how you have realized those things. Again, I will tell you, career services on campuses, we champion that work. That's our job, but we can't do it alone. So I'm asking you to join us in this work, in how we talk to students about these incredible competencies, marketable skills that they need to possess. Professionalism and work ethic. That's an interesting one lately. Many of our emerging talent view success professionally if they accomplish whatever it is they've been asked to do. They don't really want to abide oftentimes by a schedule. They are going to get it done on their own time. It might be at 3 in the morning. It's going to be phenomenal. The output's going to be great. But what they need to understand is that they are part of this broader fabric within the workforce, again, with 5 different generations in many cases, where the perception is the more hours you work, the harder you're working. I remember experiencing that with some of my past supervisors. If I would get my work done, they'd say, well, what else are you going to do? Because you should be working until 9 o'clock tonight to get this done. Because working longer means working harder, means more production. Not always the case. The talent that's emerging now, they don't see that at all. So then what happens is they're labeled as unprofessional. So we need to teach our students and our graduates that there are many ways to interpret this. And really, they have effective communication skills. They can communicate that to their employer. Having the ability to represent and articulate that they are personally accountable, not relying on others, but they take ownership, is part of this particular marketable skill. And the next one is career management. So when you ask students today, where do you see yourself in 5 years, in 10 years? Do any of you remember that question during an interview? And we had it down, didn't we? Well, when you ask today, they say, I don't know. I have no idea. Maybe own my own business, right? Teaching our students the concept of career management, which does include that professional development that they need to understand and have a handle on. And that they are able to clearly articulate their skills and their knowledge, their vision, their values, and how they hope to advance those in their own career journey. That's what that really means. But when you see career management, I know students go immediately to, I don't know what I'm doing in 5 years. I don't know what I'm doing in 2 years. I may only be with this organization for 1 year, if they're lucky. Positioning, marketing, packaging, right? That's what we all need to help them with. There isn't anything wrong. There is a lot of truth to what they speak. And I will tell you, I have 2 of these in my family. And I have always asserted I will not do a lot of coaching with my own children because that's not fair to them. So I coach their friends and hope their friends tell them. This next one is a big one. So global and intercultural fluency. This really was not part of the original NACE career readiness competencies. In 2015, when we released the competencies, that was missing. And I will tell you, we were called out, immediately called out. Wow, how about this? Have you thought about intercultural, the importance of diversity and inclusion? And of course we have. Wow, how did we not articulate that? Employers at the time did not call that out for us. We went back to the drawing table. And so 2 years later, this is where we are. The global and intercultural fluency is not only about experiencing other parts of the country. In fact, that's not even necessary if a student doesn't have the means to do that. It's really more about recognizing and respecting differences and knowing how to capitalize towards a common goal on those differences so that together we in our workforce can create best practices, moving our work forward. So that was a big one. And I will tell you that if you have an interest in anything in this space, career readiness, NACE, and there's the website. Don't go to nace.com. That's like an engineering firm or something. But naceweb.org has a plethora of amazing examples, assessment tools, best practices, toolkits to help implement this concept of career readiness. And Texans, we tend to be a little proud. Even sometimes when we shouldn't be. That's who we are. As NACE president, it was amazing to say, do you know what's happening in Texas? Do you know what our coordinating board has established as a major goal for us? It was amazing to be able to share our work with NACE, and as I engaged in speaking in other countries, here, locally, anybody who would listen to me, we talked about it. So we sit in an amazing place, but there's work to be done, right? We can't set a goal and assume it's just gonna happen. We all have to work collectively to realize this goal. So how can we adopt and integrate the promotion of marketable skills on our campuses and beyond? Who is responsible? Career Services, I will say, should be taking the lead in this conversation on campuses, not solely responsible. What needs to be done? Lots of work needs to be done. We'll unravel that in just a second. How do we know we're successful? Is it truly the results of the first destination outcomes of our students? Is that truly how we measure success? Do we on our campuses know where our graduates are going and how they're engaging? And not just the first year, but 5 years, 10 years out. What's our own picture on our campuses? And how do we take action? We're going to rally together, and by the end of this, we're going to all take action. I'm going to share some best practices and just some highlights and some challenges, because that's all part of it. So when I look at who's doing this well across the country, I'm going to name some institutions, and none of them are in Texas. And I'm doing that on purpose. I think many of us understand and know what's in our backyard, but I want to call attention to some best practices, some leaders out there who are championing this, and this is why it's working on their campus, because they have administrative support. This is coming from their regents, from their chancellors, who are saying, this is what we value. When students are asked why they are on our campuses, what's the number one response? To get a good job. Or to get into the top med school, or law school, or a PhD master's program. That is what matters. And let me tell you, if you ask parents that question, it's 100% response. They better get out of there and make some good money. I've heard it for years. So, University of Tampa, doing phenomenal work in this space. Phenomenal. They elevated their Chief Career Services position and is sitting within the president's cabinet. And many institutions who are doing this well, that's what they're doing. Wake Forest is another. Spelman is another. Ohio State University, doing some phenomenal work, much like the way UT does things. I've been at UT for a year. We do amazing things, we just don't always share our great things with one another. And Ohio State University, they will say they're the real OSU. They are doing this work, and they've been able to champion it and are trying to get it across their campus. Clemson does a phenomenal job. Virginia Tech, Michigan. So take a look at, if you're interested, just some best practices there. I will sneak in a couple of, just based on my familiarity, of some work in Texas. Before going to UT, I was at Texas State University. Any Texas State reps in the room? Anybody? Okay. So Texas State actually got behind this concept because it was our QEP, our Quality Enhancement Plan. What does that mean on our campuses? You have to do it. You are going to buy into it, and you are going to make this happen. So by the sheer chance, this was our QEP, I joined Texas State right at that time, before the coordinating board even came out with 60 by 30. This was a goal to prepare students, not their junior year and senior year, to start having the conversation early, the minute they set foot on campus. A very intentional program, if you want to look at it. It's called PACE, Personalized Academic and Career Exploration. It is integrated across the fabric of the campus. It happens in the first year programming, and now those conversations are happening within the classrooms. So if you want to take a look at that, I think it's a great model. At UT, because that's where I am now, and I couldn't talk about Texas State and not talk about UT. At Texas State, or at UT, we have, and you'll hear about this this afternoon, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but we have our Bridging Disciplines program that has incorporated this thinking and this concept into the academic experience at UT. We also have our flags, our classes that when you look at our flags, when students learn what are the learning outcomes of my experience in the classroom, they resonate with the marketable skills, this conversation we're having. And they've been doing that for a long time as well. The student experience. Many of us work closely with student affairs on our campuses, student development. It's called different things in different environments. But really looking at that student experience and how they can advance their thinking and how they can practice articulating those marketable skills. So here's something here's a best practice that many institutions are engaging in, and we're certainly making some progress at UT as well. We're really looking at integrating the marketable skills into all of our student employment positions on our campus. That's easy. We created a template. Here are the marketable skills. Here's some examples of how students acquire those skills. We're asking supervisors to have that conversation with those students. Because when you look at some of our assessment results, and when you look at, I think it was Gallup who actually did this on a national scale, when you look at who has the most influence on our students, it's faculty, and then it's those who are supervising and touching our students in student employment. So integrating that language, that thinking will help our students better articulate those marketable skills. Starting early. The model for career services really started back in the 1950s, and that's when NACE was created. At the time, NACE was called the College Placement Council, and the focus was on placement. If you are focused on placement, your students are going to be way behind in the race. It is no longer about placement. It's about readiness. It's about helping them the minute they set foot on campus to understand who they are, what their skills are, their interests, their personality, how that plays in, and most importantly, their values. They have to understand who they are and what they hope to attain. So the first year experience is a great place to do that, whether in the classroom or outside, depending on what models you're employing on your campuses. I said this earlier, career services, it is our responsibility to lead this conversation and lead this work. It's also our responsibility to bring everyone along on the ride with us. Finding champions on our campus is one of the biggest things that we can do to advance this work. The role that I'm in at UT is new. At UT, there are 18 career centers. And the role I came into is brand new. I've been there a year. And really what I'm trying to do, I have two goals. Well, I have a lot of goals. Let me clarify. I've got a colleague in the audience, so I have a lot of goals, Dave, I promise. But there are two overarching. One is to ensure that every single UT student has equitable access to career learning programs, services, resources. Amongst the 18 career centers on our campus, some have a staff of 20, some have a staff of 1. Some have a staff of 1 that wears 3 different hats. So my goal is to work across the campus and coordinate, collaborate, communicate, every word but centralize. I'm not centralizing. That was a big fear. Finding those champions. The other goal, as it pertains directly to the marketable skills, to ensure that our employer partners have equitable access to diverse talent from our campus. Sounds easy. Not always. When you have policies and procedures, you have to really look at what barriers are in place right now that prohibit that from happening and why. So I'm asking a lot of why questions in my work, and we're making great progress. So I invite you to think about those things. Do you have barriers in place that are prohibiting progress in this area? Advisory boards. How many of you have advisory boards within your colleges, your schools? Career centers should have advisory boards. The president should have advisory boards, right? We need to listen to what is happening. We can read about the trends, the workforce trends, and what the needs are, but we need to understand firsthand from our employer partners what's happening. We need to leverage assessment, data. How many of you on your campuses would say you have got data management under control? You know exactly what is happening and why and how, and you can produce a report in an hour or two. It's a big challenge. We need to put our resources in that data management because that's the only way we're going to be able to tell our story. If we can tell our story, our students can tell their story. And that's what matters here. If this concept is not in your university strategic plan, I invite you to reconsider. This is why we're here. We're here for our students. The language may look different, but can you then dig down and look at the objectives around that goal? I know at UT we are working hard on upward mobility for our students, which means access, which means the work that we're doing in this space. So mobilizing, putting it into action. Globally, I want to just touch on very quickly, this is not a conversation just in the US. This is a global conversation. As we prepare students to work internationally, as we employ internationally, and students and our graduates have an opportunity to have these global experiences, we all need to be speaking the same language. NACE does a great job of coordinating with professional associations in other countries, and I've had the opportunity to have many conversations with many countries about what they're doing. And guess what? I was so pleased to learn we're all doing and working towards the same goal. Perhaps the one thing I would love us to do a little bit better is to redefine what an engaging experiential learning opportunity really means. We are all familiar with internships, right? So you take a class, you get credit, you have an internship, preferably paid. If not paid, then the institution needs to figure out a way to make that happen. That's a barrier. But what many other countries have been doing for quite some time is partnering with their economic development and creating apprenticeships programs. I know we're doing some of that work here. We need to do more. I think it happens more too within our community college system. You see more of it there than you do in a traditional 4-year program. And I understand why, because there are often limitations when a student is engaged in a 4-year program. The way courses are offered, when they have to take it, etc. But we need to really examine, are we creating barriers? A new concept is micro-internships. Micro-internships allow students to engage in a meaningful experience, oftentimes not within your environment. They might do so from their computer. They Zoom in, they Skype in. Technology really does lend itself well to help our students have flexible experiences. And this takes me back again, why it's so important, because of the barriers. Many students who do not engage in internships, when you ask them why they don't, they will say, because I can't afford it. It's not that they can't afford the class. They cannot afford to quit their long-time part-time job to take what they see as a temporary one-semester job. And then what do they do after that? So we need to think creatively. Why is this important? Because it is through these experiences that our students can advance and best articulate their marketable skills. What they learn in the classroom is tremendous and irreplaceable. How they apply it is key when they are articulating what they bring to the table. When NACE examined trends around the globe, it was all about employability skills, marketable skills, collaboration with employers in higher education, apprenticeship programs, and an appreciation for diversity and inclusion in all of their work. They want to see our first-gen students. They want to see our underrepresented students within their workforce. They want to learn from them. But when we have barriers in place that prohibit those students from access, that's our fault. We have some work to do. We all have work to do. So I'd love to invite you to jot down these dates on the screen. May 20th and 21st. UT Austin will be hosting the National Career Competency Symposium, where we will bring experts from across the country to talk about best practices. I would invite you to certainly we'll let the career centers know. I would invite you to let others on your campus know. I went to this event, it was at Ohio State last year, and I sat with faculty, I sat with folks in assessment, institutional planning, I sat with folks in student affairs, leadership. That is what made that experience irreplaceable. What I learned from others and their barriers and how the challenges that they're facing on their campuses to get this work done, and hearing it through their lens was what was really key. So I invite you to share that with your campus. Bring a career services person. Bring someone who can be a champion to get this work done on your campus. So how do we prepare students for the future workforce? What is our future workforce? Well, according to many studies that are out there, you might call them predictions, but apparently, this is 60 by 30, right? So by 2030, we should be able to articulate the marketable skills in all of our academic programs. Well, what we're reading is we don't even know 85% of the jobs that will exist in 2030 haven't even been invented yet. So how do we prepare our students? 85%. Is this work even worth it? It is. Because when you look at where we're going, the adoption of AI, machine learning, and all the automation that's happening within our workforce, there is a strong human technology emphasis that must exist. The machines don't know how to fix themselves. They don't know when their algorithm isn't quite where it should be. right? So it does take humans to make it happen. I think, some people have felt like, oh gosh, I'm 50 years old, and so what that means is I'm going out to pasture in 10 years because I'm not going to know how to manage this work. I don't know what's on the horizon. I can't keep up. I don't want to keep up. It's okay. Because while, let me get the stat right for you. 1 million jobs will be lost to automation. That is true. Well, it's a prediction. I think it's true. Another 1.75 jobs will be created. And here's the key and how it pertains to this work. The prediction is that there will be a high need for problem solving, critical thinking, communication, listening, interpretation, analysis, and design. Not only design of the work, design of themselves, career management, right? All of those are marketable skills. The other big trend we're seeing, and we'll continue to see when executives were surveyed as part of SHRM, the Society of Human Resource Management, 57% of employers said, first and foremost, their number one priority is diversity in their workforce. Again, we have to open up the gates. We have to prepare all of our students to have a place in our workforce. And just for fun, I thought I would share some of the predicted jobs and see if any of you want to start working on your resume to find yourself in this role. Chief Productivity Officer. Do any of you have that role in your office now? Really, it's about, there's so much going on with technology and so many ways to communicate and get work done. What is truly the most productive way to get there, to realize our goals? I love this one. Wholeness mentors. So a wholeness mentor is going to make sure you don't drive yourself crazy trying to get it all done because you are completely accessible all the time. It's no longer work-life balance, it's work-life integration. How do you create that sense of keeping who you are true to who you are? Let's see, just a few others. Human technology integration specialist, autonomous transportation specialist is another one. This one I thought was interesting, and I kind of don't like it because I feel like, gosh, in age I'm kind of close, but the idea is that we need end-of-life coaches. And the concept is that because there's so much going on with AI and automation, things are going to just get a little more frenzied. End-of-life coaches are taking this approach. It's a shift in thinking from adding more days to your life to adding more life to your days. Maximizing, live it up is the idea there. I'm not getting around that one yet. So I know we're coming up on time. I want to allow for some questions, but 75% of employers want to hire graduates with experience. Ties back to our internship and removing barriers. We must prepare our students in just those quick kind of fun job description or job titles I shared. The key, we must prepare our students for lifelong learning. It doesn't stop. In fact, many of our workforce members in the future will be designing their own work products, their own work schedules, their identity. What does that tie back to? Career management. Yep, career management. So preparing our students for that lifelong learning, I invite you to have these conversations on your campuses, figure out how you can best resource and staff, integrate this thinking in your day-to-day conversations and goals. Focus on outcomes. We all want good outcomes. We all want to tell a pretty story. Most importantly, our stories need to be real, not about the rankings. The rankings are great. They are. But what are the real experiences, and what are you doing to advance that dialogue for the campuses you represent? We must invest in our future workforce. That's our students, those on our campuses now and those who will be on our campuses soon. So I hope I gave you some things to think about. Don't think about the end-of-life coaching. Forget that one. But I hope that this was helpful and kind of resonated with some of the work that you're striving to do. And if we have questions, I will take them. I think we just have a few moments, 3 to be exact.
15.
Oh,
9:15.
perfect.
So we have lots of time. So I hope to see some hands go up.
I think right over here, Ginger.
Hopefully, there we go.
I want to thank you for the presentation. It elevates this component of education. And I'm with a community college, so when we talk about education, people kind of talk about education, but they're really talking about workforce. The focus has really been on workforce, whether we like it or not. It's what it is. And this, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen to my experience. This hit me like a brick when I came on board. I've been on the board 6 years. Early on, we had a gentleman come to our board meeting to advocate for support services. And I asked him to follow up with a letter. Now, this was a gentleman that was enrolled in our schools, probably in his mid-20s. When I got that letter, when I got that written communication, I said, we're not doing something right here. If you're enrolled at this institution, you should not produce a document of this quality. And I sat down as an introduction process with our academic folks, and I conveyed this to them. I said, we need to incorporate this. It doesn't matter what degree or program you're in, you need the skill set. When I stood on the stage, and we're a large institution, I shook over 1,000 hands at graduation. I'm an employer. And I said, all these folks have connected and done what they needed to do to cross the stage. How many of them can I look at in the face and say, I would give them a job if they interviewed with me? Would they even get a chance to have a job? And the gap is huge, and we need to address it, and I appreciate you. We're in the midst of talking about a strategic plan at our school now. I'm going to put this and make sure this has got to be elevated. It's just as important as getting a degree. I mean, I envision us perhaps having Saturday academies for this type of thing, because it crosses all over. And in real life, I mean, I have a gentleman that works for me. He's older than I am, and he's an 8th grade education, but he understands critical thinking. I mean, when I told him, I said, well, we have a problem with this piece of equipment over there. And he picks up his phone, he starts talking to it. And he has the experience to know what he generally needs to do, but he had the brains to use the tools. That's the critical thinking. He had it. He had an 8th grade education, he had it. We have to convey this to people because everybody needs this to advance. And I hope that this can be focused in. What you distilled here is just one of the most important things I've heard about, at least in the community college. I went to a 4-year school. You pick up a lot of these skills in 4 years at a larger school like I did, but my ability to communicate with folks was largely through family and work experience. And my dad was a salesman, so I picked up shaking hands, eye contact, engaging. I didn't learn that in school. It wasn't taught to me formally. Now, you'd have people that might teach you, but it wasn't integrated in the process. And this is just as important in the educational process, at least at the community college, because we have students that come there that come oftentimes first-time students. You know the story, and we have to pick up the ball and run with that, and it's very important. When the gentlemen were up here yesterday, and I think it was Dr. Resler talked about the silos, and he said, yeah, the one thing we don't connect. He said it's great if we get them through the process, but if they don't get the job, what's the point? If you don't have this, you don't get the job. I'm an employer. You don't get the job. It doesn't happen. That's a huge barrier that nobody will talk about, but it's there. I'm an employer. If they come in and they're not going to make eye contact, we're going to shake my hand. It doesn't matter what their resume says, unless I'm putting them in the corner somewhere where they don't have to interact with anybody, and they may still not get the job. I kind of joke about it because I run a manufacturing company, and I tell folks, I said, I have to think about communication with my employees because most of the folks in my shop have made a conscious choice in their life. They'd rather deal with a machine than a person. So I have to know that going in. But it is going to be about people. A lot of these jobs are going to be automated, and it's going to come down to interpersonal skills are going to be the real assets that you have. I worked a poll one time when I was running for office, and the gentleman was he was a professor of philosophy at Rice. So I had to ask the question, what do your graduates do? He said they become doctors and lawyers because they learn these skills in that program. It's not formalized, but it's what you get in that environment. You're going to learn that. And we have to teach that because this is where our guys can excel. When those folks cross the stage, I said, they've done all the hard work. This is what they have to get. This is what gets them over. This is what gets them over the edge to success. And we've got to get that done. And I thank you for focusing on this because we need this in the institution just as much as any formal either trade or academic class.
Thank you.
With that, I'll give it back to you.
Thank you. I think we need to talk about a road show. Take this message on the road. We have one more ginger right over here.
Maybe if you hold the mic down, it won't.
I taught ninth grade English. I can project to the back of the room.
You need to get on camera, though.
Oh. Let me do like this then. Just a question. What kind of traction? I tell you this, these micro internships I found quite fascinating. I work at a university as well, and I tell you, whether it's a 2-year school or 4-year schools, I'm curious. I don't know that we can do things that are more transformative and impactful, both in inculcating the kinds of just skills that were articulated earlier, but also in different ways, embellishing the CV resume with these internships. And the days of you should be grateful to have the opportunity to learn this skill, non-compensated, indentured servitude, are over. Many of these students work, so they can't leave a paid position to be an intern. And yet, that internship, in terms, again, inculcating the kinds of skills that were described earlier, as well as embellishing their own background and making tangible what they're learning in the classroom, right, concretely. But this notion of a micro internship, and this is something that trustees could become very much involved in cultivating micro internships among. We have a gentleman who owns a manufacturing facility. Trustees have an important role in identifying and compelling colleagues to create internships for students. But this idea to me of a micro internship is even more appealing because it's a bit more distilled and likely to be taken up by students. So I'm just curious, what sort of traction are you enjoying?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's relatively new. And it was happening, though, in the UK already, and they were realizing quite success with it. There's a company called Parker Dewey that they have a job board, and all of their jobs are micro internships. So they have gone out, solicited projects and opportunities from employers across the country, and then they promote those opportunities to students on campus. I will tell you, I'm not endorsing Parker Dewey. We don't even use Parker Dewey at UT because I want to ensure the quality is there. I think the best way to approach this in order to gain traction is to do exactly what you said. And this is a great example that we just heard a minute ago, in that we have champions within our regents and our trustees who can help us get this work done. I talked earlier about the advisory boards we have on our campus. At UT, we have the President's Austin Innovation Board, where I go and I meet with them and I produce reports. I share some of the statistics that I'm familiar with and promote our students. And my message is a plea to engage them in these experiential learning opportunities for our students who would in other cases not have access. So the world is changing, right? And you can look at how many of our workforce is going to be composed of gig types of assignments. And I talked a little bit ago about career management, designing your own work, your own identity in the workforce. That's what this is. So micro internships really do lend themselves well to help students define who they are, what they can contribute. But here's the key. They will need to articulate what they're learning. The other is that a best practice is for somebody on your campus, at UT it would be a career professional, to engage in a very clear MOU with that employer so that there is a on-record understanding of the learning outcomes that the student will achieve. And for us, my goal is to ensure that that MOU represents the marketable skills. That's the key. Does that help?
I'm Rosemary Haggett. I'm with the University of North Texas System, and I really appreciate your comments today. I wanted to point out that at our two undergraduate institutions, closer or farther? Farther. Okay, farther. Both of our undergraduate institutions have career readiness as their QEP. And at the University of North Texas, we've incorporated a project called Career Connect, is what we call the QEP. In the Career Connect, we've established an e-portfolio system open to all of our undergraduate students. Students and faculty put student activity, either curricular or co-curricular activity, into the e-portfolio, where those activities are actually assessed for critical thinking, teamwork, or communication. And because we agree with you that the key to this is helping the student understand how to translate these experiences into marketable skills that they can share with future employers. So I wanted to tell you we're really grateful for your work and look forward to learning more from you and NACE and others.
Thank you for sharing that. You raise a great point. The e-portfolio conversation on our campus is certainly expanding, and it really is a great way for students to, as long as we help students understand it's not just a depository. This is going to help you tell your story. And so those conversations need to happen as faculty ask them to put their projects, their research projects, and some of the problems that they're solving and their Excel spreadsheets, et cetera, into this e-portfolio. We need to make sure that students don't think, oh, this is just an archive, and I'll put it there and I'm done. They're not done. They need to then think about, how do I translate that onto my resume? How do I tell the story about that? Every student should go back to their e-portfolio and revisit it before every single interview. Yes, thank you. That's great. Congratulations on that work. Thank you.